War has a sound. Sometimes it's the roar of engines. Sometimes it's the whistle of artillery. But in 1943, on battlefields stretching from the burning sands of North Africa to the muddy roads of Normandy, there was another sound, one that almost no German soldier ever heard, because it traveled invisibly, silently, and flawlessly through the air. It was the voice of an American tank commander speaking through a machine the German army never understood. A technology so advanced, so brilliantly simple, and so devastatingly effective that it changed the outcome of the war without firing a single bullet. Imagine the chaos of a battlefield. Black smoke coils into the sky like torn flags. Tank tracks grind over shattered stone. Artillery reshapes the earth every second. Sand or mud or snow, whichever the world chooses that day, clings to the boots of men who already know the taste of fear. Amid this brutality, a column of Sherman tanks pushes forward, engines rumbling like a rolling thunderstorm. Inside each steel beast, 5 soldiers sit packed together in heat, sweat, and tension. Their hearts race, but their voices? Calm, steady, coordinated. Because every one of them can hear the same clear, sharp words cutting through the noise. Red team, flank left. Blue team, hold fire until my mark. Yellow team, move up, now. No static. No distortion. No confusion. Through the SCR-508 FM radio system, American tank commanders speak as if sitting in the same room, while German crews, relying on weak, unreliable AM radios, fight alone inside their armored cages. Introducing the core idea. This is the hidden reality of World War II armored warfare. The Sherman tank wasn't just a machine of steel and gasoline, it was part of a network. A vast, invisible web tying commanders, crews, and entire armored divisions together with real-time, crystal-clear communication. German soldiers never knew this. They had no idea that every American tank was a moving node in a battlefield communication grid. To them, the Shermans looked ordinary, maybe even inferior. Thinner armor. Smaller gun. Lighter frame. But what German commanders like Heinz, Guderian, and Erwin Rommel couldn't see was what made these tanks truly dangerous. The Sherman didn't fight as one tank. It fought as one organism. 100 tanks, 100 radios, each one amplifying the next. Character and emotional foundation. Picture a young American tank commander, barely 20. His name could be Miller Johnson Harper, one of the thousands who fought in machines smelling of oil, smoke, and fear. He grips the radio handset like it's a lifeline because for him, it is. Across the battlefield, a German Panzer commander like Otto Carius peers through optics smeared with dust and sweat. Inside his Tiger tank, the air is thick with fumes. He's brilliant, experienced, deadly, but isolated. Only one tank in 5 has a workable radio. Only officers can speak. Everyone else must guess, improvise, or hope. And hope dies fast under artillery. As the two armored forces crawl toward each other, the earth shakes. Every second grows heavier. Every heartbeat louder. The American tanks shift formation like a school of fish, fluid, synchronized, controlled. The German tanks move like hunters, but each one alone, blind to the movements of its own brothers. A German commander shouts over the engine noise. His loader strains to hear him. His driver waits for orders that come seconds too late. Static hisses in their headset whenever the radio crackles alive, if it works at all. But the Sherman crews? They glide across the battlefield in a symphony of coordination. How did this happen? How did the world's most feared armored force, Germany's Panzerwaffe, end up fighting blind while the Americans, supposedly inexperienced and technologically average, fought with the most advanced radio system ever put into tanks? Why didn't German intelligence discover it? Why didn't German troops realize what was happening right in front of them? Why did every Panther and Tiger fight like a lone wolf, while every Sherman fought like a wolf pack? This story isn't just about radios. It's about the misunderstood science of communication, the brutal realities of armored warfare, and the quiet revolution that reshaped the battlefield without ever appearing in a photograph. You will see how. FM radio eliminated static that crippled German communications. Crystal-controlled frequencies gave Shermans unmatched clarity. 25-watt power let American tanks talk across miles. The German AM sets could barely reach neighboring tanks. The Sherman crews executed maneuvers that seemed impossible to German observers. Entire German units collapsed simply because they couldn't talk to each other. And how this unseen advantage flipped history on its head. The camera moves through a dusty command tent in Tunisia. Maps are pinned everywhere. A young American officer runs his finger along a route toward Kasserine Pass, explaining the plan. Behind him, a bank of radios hums, operators tuning frequencies with precision. Cut to a German field HQ where officers shout over each other, trying to relay orders through broken field telephones and overloaded AM sets. Back to the American tanks, each one receiving updates simultaneously. Back to German tanks, waiting for messengers, signals, or luck. Two worlds. Two systems. One invisible difference. As we journey across North Africa, Italy, Normandy, the Ardennes, and into the heart of Germany, one theme becomes undeniable. Germany built the most feared tanks of the war. America built the most connected tanks of the war. And the connected ones won. Yet German troops never understood why Shermans moved as if guided by a single mind. They never realized that the real weapon wasn't the steel, the gun, or the engine. It was the signal. In the next chapter, we'll step inside the tanks themselves, into the cramped compartments where men trusted technology to keep them alive. We'll watch battles unfold where communication, not armor, decided victory. We'll follow commanders who learned that coordination could outmaneuver even a Tiger's cannon. And we'll uncover how this invisible American advantage rewrote the very nature of armored warfare. This is the hidden story of World War II. A story of messages carried through dust, smoke, and chaos. A story Germany never decoded. A story that changed the war forever. The sun burns over the jagged ridgelines of Tunisia as the winter of 1943 grinds toward its end. Dust hangs in the air like a veil, drifting across the broken landscape where American and German forces prepare to collide at Kasserine Pass for the first time. The German Afrika Korps has seen war in every climate. Their commanders, Rommel's veterans, move with the calm confidence of men who believe they understand every weakness of their enemy. They think the Americans are inexperienced. They think their tanks are inferior. They think this battle will be easy. But they do not yet know the truth hidden inside every Sherman tank rolling toward them. Inside one of those Shermans, Sergeant David Harper presses the radio handset to his ear. His crew waits in darkness lit only by the glow of dials. The SCR-508 radio hums like a living creature, silent, stable, clear. A voice crackles through, not distorted, not drowned in static, but sharp and authoritative. Red Company, swing wide right. Blue Company, prepare for counter-thrust at Grid 7. All units confirm. Shermans across miles of broken ground answer instantly. To Harper it's normal. To the Germans what happens next feels impossible. As German Panzers press forward, the American tanks begin repositioning, smoothly, precisely like a single coordinated body reacting to a single brain. Shermans appear on the German flank almost before their scouts report their initial position. German tank commanders assume it's coincidence. Or luck. Or maybe fast messengers. But it's none of those things. It's the network. The first invisible blow the Germans never saw. What made the Shermans so devastating was something that could never be captured in wartime propaganda. The Germans photographed its thin armor and mocked its gun. They filmed the Tiger tank crushing a wrecked Sherman for newsreels. But what they never filmed, what they never truly understood, was the magic inside the Sherman's walls. The SCR-508. A 25-watt FM radio system that transmitted crystal-clear signals across 2, 5, even 10 miles under the right conditions. It used frequency modulation, which erased static and interference. Compared to that, the German AM radios, the FUG-5 sets, were fragile, low-powered, and noisy. Their static alone could drown out orders. Even when messages got through, they were often delayed, distorted, or lost entirely. The result? American tanks fought as one. German tanks fought as many. Commanders like Otto Carius later wrote about moments where entire panzer platoons sat waiting, motionless, because they couldn't get updates. Messages arrived minutes late. Sometimes hours. A Tiger tank could destroy a Sherman in a single shot. But a Sherman platoon could destroy a Tiger with coordination, flanking, crossfire, baiting maneuvers, smoke coordination, feigned retreats. These aren't tactics of a single tank. They are tactics of communication. When the Allies landed in Italy later in 1943, the mountainous terrain made communication even more critical. Valleys swallowed sound. Ridges blocked lines of sight. Armored units often moved through twisting, narrow roads where a single mistake could doom an entire company. And yet the Shermans kept moving like water. At Monte Cassino, at Anzio, through the shattered towns and hilltops of the Italian peninsula, American tank units operated with a coordination the Germans never matched. In one battle near the Liri Valley, German Panthers attempted a surprise assault against an American armored column. But the Shermans didn't break, scatter, or freeze. They turned into position instantly as new orders arrived over radio. A German officer watching through binoculars wrote in his diary, "The Americans maneuver as if they are all commanded from one mind." He didn't know that in a way they were. In a cramped Sherman turret miles away, a battalion commander sat with his map spread across his knees, radio pressed to his mouth, directing dozens of tanks with rapid-fire commands. Sharpen the left line. Reinforce the right. Hold fire. Advance. Flank. Smoke shells now. Such precision simply didn't exist in the German armored force at this point in the war. Their doctrine had been built for lightning warfare, fast attacks, quick communications, short engagements. But drawn-out tank battles in mountains required something different. They required a network. The Americans had it. The Germans didn't. When Allied forces landed in Normandy in June 1944, the German tanks waiting for them were terrifying. Panthers. Tigers. Jag Panthers. Machines with guns that could slice through a Sherman as if it were made of tin. And yet, again and again German armored counterattacks collapsed. Why? Because even the most powerful tank is helpless if it cannot talk. German Panthers fought with limited radio availability. In many units, only platoon leaders had radios. Everyone else followed flags, hand signals, or visual cues. In the chaos of hedgerow country, that system failed instantly. A Panther could not see its commander. A commander could not see his platoon. And the battlefield swallowed them whole. Meanwhile, American Shermans used radios to report ambushes, call artillery, request air support, coordinate flanking maneuvers, share enemy positions instantly, avoid friendly fire, shift formations in seconds. German tank commanders often described seeing Sherman units shift directions as if they were dancing. One German commander shouted at his radio man, "Find their frequency. Listen to how they move." But they couldn't. FM modulation prevented interception. Even if intercepted, it sounded like quiet noise. The Germans were deaf to the American network. And in war, the deaf cannot hear danger coming. To the German tank crews, Sherman tanks seemed to swarm. They attacked from angles German manuals never predicted. Left flanks, rear, even synchronized dual flanks supported by infantry moving in perfect rhythm. This wasn't luck. It wasn't improvisation. It was the Sherman Wolf Pack, a strategy enabled only by radio technology. A platoon leader could call. Panther spotted on the ridge. Blue 2 faint front. Blue 3 smoke. Blue 4 get behind him. Within seconds the formation moved. Panther crews inside their steel coffins heard only the engine roar and the pounding of shells. They couldn't hear the orders coming from their own leaders. They couldn't coordinate their movements. They could only react. And reacting in tank warfare is death. The Sherman was weaker. But weakness in numbers becomes deadly when it moves in perfect harmony. Winter 1944. The Ardennes. The Battle of the Bulge. Snow smothered the forests. Fog blinded both sides. Engines froze. Tracks iced over. The front lines shifted like ghosts in the mist. And the Germans attacked with everything they had left. Panthers, Tigers, Jag Tigers, mechanized infantry, and over 200,000 men surged through the snowy woods. They hoped the Americans would collapse in confusion. But something unexpected happened. The Shermans trusted their radios. Even as snowstorms blocked vision, even as whiteout conditions made hand signals impossible, the American FM network held strong. Tank commanders could talk. Units could reorganize. Reinforcements could be summoned instantly. German tanks could not. Their AM radios struggled in the cold. Static grew worse. Signals vanished. At times, entire German armored columns waited for hours for information. In one famous incident near St. Vith, an American tank company used radio coordination to relocate, regroup, and ambush a German armored attack in less than 20 minutes. A German officer later wrote, "They appeared where we least expected them, as if guided by perfect foresight." It wasn't foresight. It was communication. By 1945, as American forces pushed across the Rhine, German veterans finally began noticing something strange. Shermans never moved alone. Shermans never hesitated. Shermans never stopped waiting for orders. German intelligence began intercepting fragments of American transmissions, but they sounded like meaningless pulses. They didn't understand FM modulation. They didn't know how to decode crystal-controlled frequency systems. Panzer ace Otto Carius admitted in his post-war memoirs, "We could never understand how quickly the Americans coordinated their attacks. They always seemed to know where to strike." General Heinz Guderian, architect of German armored doctrine, confessed late in the war that communication failures, not firepower, were killing the panzer force. Rommel observed during Normandy, American armor moves with a unity that we cannot duplicate. The truth finally became clear. American tanks weren't superior. American communication was. The more historians study World War II technology, the clearer the reality becomes. The most powerful weapon carried by the Sherman tank was not its gun. It was its radio. A weapon that coordinated infantry, synchronized artillery, guided tank destroyers, directed air support, kept commanders fully informed, allowed instant responses. It made American units faster, smarter, more flexible, and far more dangerous than their individual machines suggested. The Germans never adapted. They never mass-produced FM radio. They never modernized their armored communication network. And they paid for that mistake in every battle from 1943 to 1945. German tank crews often said they felt alone on the battlefield. American tank crews said they felt connected. That alone explains the war. A tank is a weapon. A radio turns that weapon into a system. And systems win wars. The Sherman tank did not defeat the Tiger by outgunning it, outrunning it, or out-armoring it. It defeated the Tiger by out-communicating it. An invisible revolution, a silent network, decided battles that thousands of men witnessed but only a handful understood. This is why German troops never realized the truth. The secret was not on the outside of the Sherman. It was humming quietly inside. When the guns finally fell silent in Europe in May 1945, the world looked nothing like the one that had marched into war 6 years earlier. Cities lay broken. Nations were scarred. Millions grieved loved ones who would never return. But amid the ruins and rubble, the surviving tank crews, those who had lived through the thunder of armored warfare, began to step down from their steel machines for the first time in years. They looked at the tanks that had been their homes, their prisons, and their shields. They touched the worn metal. They said silent goodbyes to the friends they had lost. And deep inside the Shermans that rolled to a stop across Europe, one piece of equipment still hummed softly, faithfully, as if unaware that the war had ended. The SCR-508 FM radio. For years, this device had carried the voices of commanders, warnings, orders, cries for help. It had saved lives. It had shaped battles. It had woven American armored forces into a single fighting organism. Yet even now, months after victory, few soldiers and fewer historians truly understood what this small metal box had accomplished. Looking back across the vast sweep of the conflict, it becomes clear that the greatest advantage a military can possess is not always the most dramatic, not always the most photographed, not always the loudest. Sometimes the most decisive weapon is the one no one notices. The Germans built tanks that terrified the world, high-velocity guns, thick-angled armor, engines engineered with brutal precision. Their Tiger and Panther tanks became legends, symbols of unstoppable force. But legends don't win wars. Networks do. The American Sherman tank fought differently because it communicated differently. It didn't need to win duels. It didn't need to match the Tiger gun for gun or the Panther armor for armor. Because it wasn't fighting alone. Every Sherman was part of something larger, an unseen lattice of coordination that ran across fields, forests, deserts, and ruined cities. A network that let units act in unison, maneuver with purpose, and strike with the precision of a single mind. It is easy now, with decades of historical distance, to forget just how revolutionary this was. Modern armies take communication for granted. Radios, satellites, encrypted networks. Today they form the very skeleton of military strategy. But in 1943 this idea was astonishing. The Germans clung to outdated communication doctrine, relying on partial radio distribution and flawed AM technology. Their tank core, so fearsome in metal, was fragile in the airwaves. And fragility in communication is fragility in war. When American tank commanders sat inside their Shermans, they didn't feel powerful because of their armor. They didn't feel protected because of their gun. They felt connected. That connection gave them courage. It gave a young commander the confidence to push forward, because he knew he wasn't stepping into the unknown alone. He had a voice in his ear telling him what lay ahead. He had allies who knew his position. He had support only a radio call away. German tankers often fought in silence. Otto Carius later wrote that inside a Tiger tank, the loneliness was suffocating. Decisions were made in isolated turrets, under crushing stress, with incomplete information. The radio was unreliable. The airwaves choked with static. Many tanks had no radio at all. Carius wrote, "Often we fought blind." American tankers rarely fought blind. Their radios were their eyes, farther reaching than any periscope, clearer than any binoculars. In war, vision is life. If you stand today on the cliffs above Normandy or in the forests of the Ardennes, or in the hills of Italy where Sherman tracks still rust beneath layers of moss, you can almost hear the faint echoes of those old radio transmissions. Short bursts, commanding voices, urgent calls woven into the smoke of battle. Those transmissions carried more than information. They carried strategy. They carried unity. They carried the thing Germany lacked most in the final years of the war: a system. This is the real legacy, one that outlived the Sherman tank itself. The lesson that would define not only the remainder of the 20th century, but the shape of every military force today. A connected army will always defeat a stronger, isolated one. The Americans did not defeat the German war machine through superior armor or firepower. They defeated it through coordination, through the quiet, almost invisible power of communication. In war, a single tank cannot win. But a network of tanks? A synchronized force? A united battlefield mind? That can reshape history. Perhaps the most astonishing part of this story is how long it took for the Germans to understand the truth. Throughout the war, they believed the Sherman's movements were sloppy luck, or overwhelming numbers, or clever battlefield tricks. They never imagined American tanks were operating on a unified grid of voice communication. German officers often complained that Sherman seemed to materialize on their flanks or show up at the exact moment they were needed. It wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It was radio. The Germans misinterpreted American coordination as reckless bravery. They misread tactical maneuvers as desperation. They misjudged the agility of American armored units because they assumed their own disadvantages were universal. They thought no one could coordinate large tank formations in real time. They thought communication on that scale was impossible. They were wrong. The Sherman radios changed what was possible. And by the time German commanders realized the full extent of American communication capability, it was spring 1945, too late to change anything. After the war, when the world began rebuilding, military theorists across nations gathered to study the conflict. They examined weapons, strategies, campaigns, failures, triumphs. And many of them reached the same conclusion. The greatest American armored innovation of World War II was not steel. It was signal. It wasn't the tank itself that broke the back of German forces. It was the system inside it. FM radios became the foundation of post-war military strategy. Communication became doctrine. Coordination became the backbone of modern mechanized warfare. Sherman tanks were eventually replaced, first by the M26 Pershing, then the Patton series, and eventually by the M1 Abrams. But one thing remained constant. Every new tank carried a better radio. Every new army relied on a stronger network. Every new doctrine emphasized communication above all else. Because the war had taught a brutal, unforgettable truth. A tank without communication is just a steel box waiting to die. Today, when historians walk through museums and look at the Sherman tank, their eyes often drift toward its armor thickness, its turret design, or its 75mm gun. But inside those tanks, quiet, unpolished, easily overlooked, sits the device that changed the war more than anything else. A box of wires. A set of crystals. A transmitter and receiver. Nothing glamorous. Nothing fearsome. But everything effective. It symbolizes the triumph of connection over isolation. Teamwork over individual strength. Systems over lone warriors. The Germans built mighty tanks. The Americans built a mighty network. And the network won. As we close this story, imagine the last day of a Sherman cruise war. The sky is gray. The engines grow cold. The barrels point toward nothing. The fields, once scarred by battle, fall silent. Inside the tank, the radio is still warm. Still capable. Still ready. Its job is finished. But its legacy lives on, not just in the books of historians, not just in the doctrine of modern armies, but in the very idea that communication is the cornerstone of victory. In the end, the greatest secret of the Sherman tank was never its mechanics. It was its voice. The voice that guided armies. The voice that shaped battles. The voice the Germans never heard, never understood, and never prepared for. And that silent, unseen advantage would help bring an end to the most destructive war the world had ever known. So when we look back at World War II and ask why the Shermans prevailed against tanks that seemed invincible, the answer is simple and stunning. Victory belonged not to the strongest armor, but to the clearest signal.